In Chapter 4.4 and 4.5, we're going to learn shortcuts to proving triangles congruent. In Chapter 4.3, we had to use the definition to prove that they were congruent. By using the definition, we had to show that all three sets of corresponding sides were congruent. And we had to show that all three sets of corresponding angles are congruent. The first shortcut is to show that three sides of one triangle are congruent to three sides of another triangle. And that's called side, side, side. The next one is to do side, angle, side, and we have to be particular in this one. It's not any angle. It has to be the angle that's included between the two sides that are congruent. So two sides and the included angle. The third way is angle, side, angle. This time the side that's congruent to the other side is in between the two angles that are congruent. So two angles and the included side. The next one is angle, angle, side. So we would have an angle, and then we go down to the next one that was congruent. So the second angle, and then the side. So two angles and the non-included side. The last one pertains to a right triangle only. And if you have in a right triangle a leg and a hypotenuse congruent, then the triangles are congruent. So this is hypotenuse, leg. This only works in a right triangle. If you look at using other triangles, if we have side, side, angle, it could make two different triangles. So on this one we do have an angle that's 30 degrees, a side that's 11, and a side that's 6. But that side that's 6 can actually swing and hit two different triangles that we can make with it. So side, side, angle only works when we have a right triangle. The other one that doesn't work is angle, angle, angle. And the best way to look at why angle, angle, angle doesn't work is to look at this picture here of A, B, C. And let's make another triangle, DE. Let's make these two parallel so we know that this angle is congruent to this angle. And this angle here is congruent to this angle here. They both have angle A if I take apart these two triangles. So I know that triangle A is congruent to triangle A because it's the same angle. This was congruent to this, and E was congruent to C. So we have all three angles congruent, but these two triangles are not congruent. So AAA does not work, and side-side angle does not work. The worksheet that I'm going to have you do covers this, where you have to determine if two triangles are congruent, and if they are, state why. So in this first picture, we have an angle that's congruent. We have a side that's congruent, and then we know by vertical angles that these two angles have to be congruent. So we have angle, side, angle. In the next picture, they show us two sets of sides that are congruent, and they share a common side, so by reflexive they're congruent. So this one again is side, side, side. The next one shows an angle congruent and one side congruent. And then we know that the shared side has to be congruent. But in this one we have side, side, angle. So this doesn't work, and it's no. And the next one we have two sets of angles congruent, and the included are shared side congruent. So this would be angle, side, angle. The next one we know the vertical angles have to be congruent, so we have side, angle, side. And the next one we have a right triangle. We have the shared side congruent, so we have a leg and a hypotenuse congruent. So this would be hypotenuse leg. We're going to skip the proofs for a while, and we're going to go down to the coursework. So in this one we're going to use the following information. An architect used a window design in the diagram when remodeling an art studio. AB and CB both measure 3 feet, so they're congruent. For problem 3, we're supposing that D is a midpoint of AC. If D is a midpoint of AC, then AD has to be congruent to DC. And they share a common side, which is BD. So here we were given that AB is congruent to BC. That was given. AD is congruent to DC, and that's because of the midpoint. And then BD is congruent to BD because of reflexive. So this was side, side, side. And number 4, we're given that angle A, we still have AB is congruent to BC. And that was given. We're given also that angle A is congruent to angle C. And we know that BD is congruent to BD. But in this case, we have side, then the next congruent thing is an angle, and then nothing, so we can't really go that way. So the way we would go is side, side. Excuse me, I went the wrong way again. We would do side, side, angle. And that doesn't work. For number 4, we know that the vertical angles are congruent, but we don't have enough to prove congruence because we don't have another side or an angle. So no. Number 5, we have a right triangle. We have 2 legs that are congruent, and the hypotenuse that's congruent, so yes, by hypotenuse leg. And number 6, we know that the shared side has to be congruent, so we have all 3 sides congruent, so it's side, side, side. So that concludes our lesson for 4.5 and 4.4. Submit all this, the notes and the coursework that we did together, to Seesaw, and then work on the worksheet.